Ladies and gentlemen, we're here. Episode number 57. Man, just zooming through these episodes. I feel like we blinked and episode 50 passed us. Brad, how you doing today?
Good, man. The guys are all prepping. This is Thursday when we're filming this. They're prepping to leave this afternoon for the Bogey Bro West Coast tour. So I'm pumped for them. You know, I live that travel life. Part of it, I'm like, man, don't miss that. But also, they're going to play a bunch of fun courses, have a fun event with Flippy out at Huntington Beach Disc Golf Club, which will be extremely exciting. So I'm excited to see the content they get out, and just I'm pumped for them. You know, wishing them safe travels, and hopefully any of our West Coast folks listening to this, you'll make it out to one of the Bogey Bro battles. We have one in about every state out there on the West Coast. So,
dude, I super jealous. You know, next year as we just continue to grow, that's what we'll do. Is next year it'll be like, all right, cool. We took 4 this year. Next year we take 6. We'll just jump on with them. It'll be great.
Yep, I think so. Yep, I think Robbie C takes on the world is the next series. So,
oh man, tried flying over to Europe, converting everything.
Zimbabwe,
dude, I'm here for it. What goes faster, Robbie C's pigs or a cheetah? Chasing Robbie C.
Robbie C's cheetah versus an actual cheetah.
Man, that's
great content. If you want to see Robbie C go to Africa and throw against various safari animals, comment below. So,
well, who's not going to be competing against safari animals? Hopefully anytime soon. We have a newer player as a guest today. I actually got the chance while I was he's a Lynchburg local. So I got the chance to play. Brad, we both did. We got the chance to play 2 different rounds with him.
That's correct.
So this will be fun because we've like actually seen our guest's game a little bit. So we'll have some insight into his bag, what he's got going. But before we dive into that, we have always got to thank our presenting sponsor of In the Bag, and that is Flippy Disc Golf. We are rocking. I'm rocking the In the Bag Flippy gear. If you're looking for comfortable t-shirts, performance wear with their new Soul Pro gear, they've got everything covered at this point. So you want sweatshirts, they got it. You want t-shirts, they got it.
Shorts, they have shorts now, people.
Yeah.
I'm pumped to get mine in. I'm very excited.
Covering your tops and bottoms.
Yeah. So, and by the way, Foundation, obviously Flippy is a presenting sponsor to the Bogey Bro Tour as well. So a bunch of new Foundation merch is going to be available starting, I believe, tomorrow, as well as these cool tour shirts for our visual watchers. Here we go. And little back. Yeah. So we have a sweet Bogey Bro Tour shirt, like a band tee style, has all the tour stops on the back. Very cool. So make sure you check that out at flippydisc.com. Use code Foundation for some discounts to get you some awesome gear for cheap. Again, thanks to Aaron. Aaron's been a supporter for a very long time now for In the Bag and the whole Foundation crew. So thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Flippy. And actually, I guess spoiler alert a little bit, but Aaron, you'll see him in a couple Foundation videos, actually. They're going to film him when they're out there. They're going to do a couple challenges with him, and you'll see him on a special video that we're going to film out at the Huntington Beach Disc Golf Course. So I'm excited for y'all to meet Aaron. Great dude. Flippy's a great company. Make sure you support him. And, speaking of supporting, hey, here's my transition, Robbie. Let's get Nathan on here so we can support him on shaping his bag a little bit more.
Wow. I'm so proud.
I know.
Welcome to the podcast. Nathan, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing pretty good.
I'm excited to have you on.
Stoked to be here.
Because I was telling Robbie, this is like a very unique episode because outside the Foundation guys, and Jason was not Foundation, now he is Foundation. Outside of all those guys, I've never played around with any of the people on this podcast, which is cool. I played 2 rounds with you, Nathan. And also, I've had the pleasure of, I think when you were just starting out, you coming into the store and we walked through your bag and we did some In the Bag live. So,
yeah, pretty much.
What a cool episode, because it has all come to the culmination of this moment. So we appreciate you being on. I'm excited. I see some of the discs in your bag here that I helped you pick out. So I'm pumped to walk through this.
Absolutely. This will be a fun, I think for me, it'll be a fun little backseat episode to kind of hearing and asking questions on when y'all discussed building this bag to begin with, what changes you've seen, Nathan, and things like that. So we want our players to get to know you. We know you, Nathan, but we want our viewers to get to know you as a player, my man. So we got a couple foundational questions. First being, how long have you been playing disc golf?
I really started picking it back up in February, I believe. And so before that, I had dabbled over the past 10 years on and off, and then really discovered that this was something that was for me back in February. So
awesome. So just a couple months in, and I will go ahead and let you guys know if you're like, oh man, he's only a few months in, like everything feels new. We said it multiple times when Jason and I were driving away from playing with you. I was like, wow, for being 3 months in, 4 months in, he is one of the most progressed 3 or 4 month players that I've ever seen. So
definitely.
Well, thank you. I will say that I forward a lot of that to my work and how things I'm able to put videos on while doing work and everything. So there's a lot of content absorbed throughout the day. And it is really, I feel like, catapulted me into a lot farther than I really reality should be.
Hey, however the road takes us, that is completely okay. So getting to know you as a player, if we were to line you up on a hole, you got a flat open field, there's a basket X amount of distance away. How far do you feel like you're reaching it consistently on both backhand and forehand? At what distance is that?
I would say 300-ish backhand, and forehand 22, 250. I've not spent a lot of time on forehand. I'm just now introducing that and working on that. So, but I would at least minimum 200 on the forehand, though.
Okay.
And we can personally validate that.
Yeah. And like truly from a perspective of, I think people need to understand, like 3 or 4 months in, you have those numbers. That's incredible. There are people that have been playing 3 or 4 years that have those numbers. So well done on that. Woo! Sorry about that, audio
Live
listeners.
sneeze.
Here we go. We're moving. So we line you up. That's distance. We put you on the putting green, and we're like, all right, Nathan, we want to put you 10 putts from 15 feet, 10 putts from 25 feet, and 10 putts from 40 feet. How many are you making at each station?
I went out and did this morning just to make sure that I had legitimately measured it out. And 40 feet is a lot farther than you actually in your head think it is.
That is the truth.
I'm giving 9 out of 10 for 15, 25, 60% of them, 6%, 40, 0. I look back there, I'm like, this is a layup. Like, this is, in my head, I'm laying up. Unless I've got a good backstop, I might run it. But at that distance, I don't have a good enough flight out of my putt to consider it a putt. It's more of a toss.
Yeah, Nathan has what I call the cornhole putt. So he does a very lofty like putt and just kind of, I mean, I don't know how many times, Nathan, we were playing and your putter went in the basket with virtually no chains because it's just like up and in. So
it's one of those things that I've had to talk to myself, like, the chains are there for a reason. Like, you don't have to get perfect distance. And so I've started adding a little bit more spin on that. And that's where I'll step up to a 25-foot putt, and I'm in my head 100% I'm making it. But as far in reality, that's where, but I'm completely comfortable with 25-foot. But yeah, that's where the 40 is where I don't have that. I think that's where the loftiness gets me, is I don't have enough to get there, and it's starting to Hyzer and stuff like that. And that's the one thing that I'm working on.
Yeah. And that makes sense. That's such a interesting, the phrase you used, I don't have to have perfect distance. I guess that's something I see happen all the time, but I've never put into words as I've watched player after player do it. But that makes total sense. Like, I want to give it, because I think I've even said, like, I want to give it just enough to get there, kind of a deal. And I don't believe you have to take like a Gannon Burr approach and knock the basket over
right.
because that creates its own problems. But perfect distance, that is, taught me something new.
When we made the comment when we were playing, he's like, you don't like using change, do you? And I was just like, that's just how it comes out sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey, that's okay. So what would you say at this point, Nathan, is the biggest strength of your game before we dive into your bag?
I would say the shorter end, 200 in, putter, scramble approach type deal.
That yellow pig. Anything you can use the yellow pig with, right? You're deadly with that yellow pig.
Yep. I pulled it out of the bag, and then I still hadn't felt comfortable. And I was like, all right, when we'll play 2 pig onlys. Well, I say that. What it is I take my dog for a walk, and I just walk from basket to basket throwing it. And that's when it really was like, okay, I've got this. Like, I know exactly how this thing is going to do. And I've started doing that. I did it with the glitch the other day, and it was not as forgiving as the pig was, but
yeah, the glitch is very touchy. I can see. So the glitch is fighting its way into your bag, or trying to fight its way into your bag.
I've got them, and it's one of those. Does this have a place? I know people, sing its praises, but does it have a place for me? Like, I like tossing it in the backyard, but as far as throwing it, like, I'm getting more out of a pig than I would a glitch. I know they do two different things, but as far as distance wise, that's where I'm coming to struggle with it. It's saying it's not worth it for me to only get 100, 150 feet out of this.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Like, you can manipulate the pig to do what the glitch is already doing. So why? Yeah, I totally get that. I think for me personally, when I first put the polecat in my bag, it was like, well, why would I throw my polecat here when I can just throw my pig and be fine? But now when you play around with me, you'll notice like it's a pretty balanced attack on what I'm throwing at the green. It's either going to be a pig or a polecat, but I accomplish different things with them. So
that's where I'm at too. I'm thinking, like, I've got the polecat. That's one of those I've had for a long time. Like, before I knew what I was doing or what the disc was do, I had a polecat, and it's like, will that make it back into the bag? Like, do I need to try a little, loftier, floatier approach? And that's where I'm just a fan of the stability, I think, now, because that's what the problem with the glitch is I can't give it the beans and trust it to go straight. Like, it's burning, it's going over.
Yeah, and that's a. I think there are things in your game that you are well beyond 3 to 4 months of being in the game, and then there's other, like, that kind of a touchy throw is definitely something that, like, okay, that's a high level throw to watch someone step
is where
up.
I'm not. Yeah.
So
even trying to throw like the proxy on an Hyzer line to get it, I'm not completely comfortable with it. Like, just manipulating it to that angle.
And that makes sense. I think one of the big things and you seem, Nathan, like an all-in guy, and you want to be proficient as soon as possible, as we all do. And I think some of it takes that time. So let's dive into your bag, and I want to look at. We're going to be the recommendations coming on the distance driver side, just based on a conversation we had outside of all of this. So we're going to end high speed, which means we're going to start low speed and work our way up. So you got blue bonnets in the bag. You're putting with a blue bonnet. So that's kind of self-explanatory. You don't really ever throw the blue bonnet, right? Just putting with them?
Yeah, just putting with them.
Okay, so we take the jump to the next level, and I want to talk about the Envy proxy combo. It's something we discuss a lot here in the bag. Mm-hmm. What is the Envy proxy combo doing for you?
Well, the proxy, so I'm looking at that as my straight now. Like, before I looked at it as an understable, but now, like I said, as I progressed, like, I don't feel like I need to have a straight nut per se. Like, I can manipulate it enough, like, Hyzer wise, to get that straighter or whatever, depending on the power. And the Envy is actually not as stable, because it's the Stay Swanky, so it's the Prism Plasma, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's not as stable as the Eclipse. So I can still get slight turnover, but just as soon as it starts to turn, it comes back. And so that, before I had the Glow Sensei, which is straight turn. There's no flip on that one. That's what that replaced, just because when I switched to the blue bonnets, I took that one out, and that's what the Envy replaced. And so that's just what it is I've got, proxy for straight to kind of turn, or then the Envy as a comfortable just throw when we get down there.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so moving over to the overstable side of things, I like the spread of that. And I also love that you said when you progress, you don't necessarily need a straight disc. You can just manipulate the angle on both sides. Right. Definitely two sides of the coin to that. I think that some people prefer that, like, we talk about it often, of do I want a disc to fly? This is what I wanted to fly, like, off the shelf, or do I want something I can work both ways? I'm with you personally, Nathan, in terms of I have no disc that is just naturally straight. Like, right. Even my straight disc in all my slots, I know is going to have fade on the end of it every single time. And if I don't want that fade, I just Hyzer flip.
That's like with the Envy. Like, I didn't like it at first. I couldn't, because it was coming, like, it's not like the Sensei. the Glow Sensei. And so until I, got there and just threw it for a half an hour by itself, back and forth, and then I understood it. And now I'm like, okay, this can do, again, manipulating angles. Now, on the lower end, like in the putters, that's where I can feel like I can manipulate angles more, and I don't need the disc to do as much for me. But as you move up the ladder, then it's not so much anymore.
Yeah, it gets a little dicier once you get faster. So on the overstable side, you've got 3 overstable putt and approach discs in your bag. You've got 2 pigs and a Toro. So talk us through the uses for those, kind of why all 3 are in the bag.
All right, so the yellow pig is just my regular R Pro. The Glow Pro is the prickly pig. It's the Bradley Williams. I just put that in there just to start cycling with the pigs. And those I could pretty much, I give them the beans and they're like straight and just dump like they're in it. Now the Toro is in there because it's got more shape to it. It's got that longer, wider. It's not straight. Like it's not a straight disc for me. And so that's what that is a, forehand type, get around to the right, or legitimately an actual, utility disc.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not, it would function kind of like,
I look at it as more of a mid-range, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. So like a Justice, or what we would use for those kind of a shot. Yeah.
Yeah. I use a Bobcat like that. It's like, it's kind of in that same category, but it's a mid-range, but I kind of use it like an approach disc most of the time. That makes sense.
Yeah. No. And I think that's a great use, especially when let's say you don't have the 400 feet of power. It's like, okay, do I really need a really overstable putt and approach disc and a really overstable mid-range? No, because if you do, I bet you're probably going for one over the other every time anyways. Right. So it's just clogging spots in your bag. So I think that is a completely natural response. Does the Toro, something I've not asked a lot of people about the Toro, what's the ground action like on a Toro?
Out of the hand, and I feel, depending on where it's at, I feel like you can get ground action out of it. And that's where I will switch back and forth too. If I want more ground action off of something, I will throw the Toro over a pig. But my pig is one I was like, all right, I need to stick a little bit more. It's your turn. And the Toro, it's if there's a possibility that I need a little bit more out of it, and I'll throw it. Maybe I may not get it, but it's not. I mean, it's the Glow plastic, so it doesn't. I mean, it's pretty solid. So.
Yeah. Any of that Champion or the Collar Glow, it seems to be definitely a tick more stable for sure. And then, throwing the Champion versus the Star, even I would say that both got ground action, but I say the Champ, just because of that little extra stability, Robbie, for me, got a little bit more ground flare action.
Yeah, if I was to replace it, I would get the Champ to replace the Glow.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's valid options, because I think that's something I'm looking for. We even talked about, feels like it was 2 episodes ago, but at this point it's probably like 15, 20 episodes ago. Brad and one of our guests was talking about like how much ground play they're going for. And I've started doing that with my Justice in that same slot, like when I need big skip, because pigs just don't do that. So, which is another reason why they're the greatest disc of all time. Anyways, moving on to mid-ranges, you've got, it looks like, so if we bump the Toro up, we would count that as 4 mid-ranges in the bag. And so you've got them really pretty well spread out. So I love your mid-range setup. I was worried because we always ask for a little behind the scenes look for our listeners. We always ask, what part of your bag are you like least confident in right now? Because usually if they're like, oh yeah, I'm really not confident in my putters, and then we're looking at it and we're like, oh, the driver's the big area. Well, we'd rather help you fix the area that you're not confident in and give you some confidence there. So I was very worried, Nathan, that you were going to be like, yeah, my mids. It's just a little, because I don't want to touch these at all.
I'll take
Brad
credit for
set you up well. So y'all taught me through the conversation that y'all had about the mids, because I can see Brad's influence very clearly laid over top of the mid ranges.
I'll ask Nathan, because I mean, if you want to recall a little bit of that, because that was one of the first conversations you and I had, Nathan, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to walk us through that.
Well, because I brought in what I had already had, whether it being gifts or I'd picked up, not knowing what's going on. I said, this is what I've got. and then let's walk through, each, understable, neutral, mid. And I think I didn't have an overstable mid, and Brad was like, you want the Mustang? And so he put the Mustang in my bag. The Hex, I bought it off of just knowing what it does, seeing it being fly and everything like that. And the same thing with the Uplink. I actually it was in the store, and I saw it on the shelf, and I was like, so much chatter about this. That's going to replace my Soul. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to replace it with a Soul. And then turns out I was there to actually pick up one of the subscription boxes. And lo and behold, it wasn't a subscription box, another Uplink. So I walked out with 2 Uplinks that day. And it was one of those, hard to find things where nobody had them, and I walked out with 2. So it was pretty incredible. But that's where that went.
Jason and I may or may not have saw your name and may or may not have put that in there.
Yeah.
So, and then like the relay, I believe we'll get to the relay in a minute. Relay is a weird one for me, Robbie. Do you count it as a fairway or do you count it as a mid-range?
So I would count the relay as a fairway, but just because I think like for me, the hand feel comes down to, I know a lot of people try to talk about like flight, especially, but as someone who had a long standing fear of drivers in general, like as I was growing into the game, when I put a driver in my hand, my body subconsciously told me, throw it hard, dummy. Like, here we go. Let's kill this thing. So as soon as that blade touches my fingers, it's like all sense leaves my hand and my body. And so because of that, the relay like falls into that category for me. But I can understand flight-wise why people would say it like serves the perfect gap between the Hex and the Uplink. Like,
yeah, because what we talked about in the store, because the relay you won off of a live order pool, right?
Yeah, that was the one where when I switched to the blue bonnets that day, I bought the blue bonnets for my birthday, and y'all did a putter challenge on that. Yeah,
right. So I include that with the challenge, but the reason I thought of that is because we had the discussion. The Mustang, it's an Apex plastic, correct, Nathan?
The clear Mustang? See-through,
yeah. So my experience with the Mustang, it's not as stable as like the flight numbers would indicate.
Right.
It's not like understable by any means, but it's more straight. And I thought it was like a perfect, because I think people want a buzz. Like when they think of a buzz, they see like pros with like these beat-in buzzes that are just like laser beam straight.
Right.
And they have I was never able to get like the carry, like the glide out of a buzz that I wanted it to have. But the Mustang really has like some extra glide, and it's pretty straight off the shelf in the Apex plastic. Now the swirly Apex is maybe a tick more stable. So I thought that was like a pretty good
wait, no, it's an Eternal. It's the clear one, so it's Eternal.
I'm sorry, Eternal.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. I was thinking Eternal the whole time.
I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, the Eternal. So it's like actually, it has stability at the end, but it's pretty straight flight.
Yeah. And that's what I look at too. If it's one of those, I know I want it to dump to the left on the end, so just sit or whatever it's going to do at the end.
Yeah,
but really, I feel like the Hex, I look like, okay, I want straight and far.
Yeah.
And the Mustang is just straight and stop,
Yeah, because to me, the Hex kind of creeps into the fairway category.
Almost. It's a weird beast. It really is.
And the relay kind of creeps into the mid-range. They're just like kind of a nice pairing for one another. But yeah, the Uplink obviously is a great choice there. And then like the reason the relay came into play is when we were talking in the store, he needed something straighter. We didn't have Hexes at the time.
Yeah.
And Hexes were like extinct for that amount of time. But the relay, in my experience of the relay, they're pretty dead straight as well. But you can get like the distance, like my 9-year-old can throw in almost 300 feet. So like they're very, very comfortable. And yours is even a little bit more lightweight. It's not super lightweight, but I think it's like 172 maybe.
It lived where the Crave is in my bag until I got the Crave last week.
Yeah, right. So, and now that you're, progressing, the Crave may kick the relay out. But at the time, the relay seemed like the answer, Robbie, for that neutral, I want to call it mid-range-ish type slot, especially with being a newer player. So to keep him out of the distance driver conversation, but like give him a taste of a driver feel in the hand, but give him like the mid-range kind of control, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Man, 6-speeds are just, it's so funny because I feel like, MVP does 6-speed so well. And I'm going to say this, and the comments are going to be like, "Oh, Robbie, obviously you didn't think about blank, 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 blank," and they're going to list all these discs off that are like obviously fantastic 6-speeds. But when I think of the 6-speed market, I truly feel like MVP, like the gyro folks, are the only ones trying to corner the 6-speeds. Everyone else just jumps straight to 7s.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I was telling somebody the other day, and I told him, like, if really the way I feel is MVP puts like a 0.5 on it, round it up 1, because that's really where it's at in my head, at least with some of this stuff. So it's one of those, I feel like it's almost like they bring it back down just to be different, you know?
Well, to me, I would disagree, Nathan, because I think the relay, I think that 0.5 matters only because, again, you're talking mentally, Robbie, when you feel that driver in your hand. When I see like a 6.5, if I see that 6 in the front, my mind says, I don't have to kill this thing. It's going to go far, and I don't have to kill it. So to me, I think they do it that way because, you know, the relay, you can really smooth that out and it'll go very far. You do not have to kill that disc.
No, really don't.
Get it to go far.
That's the one that I've worked on my form as far as like creating drag and whip or whatever. That's the one that allowed me to throw 50, 60% on that and get, you know, comfortable distance out of it. Like, or you throw it, you feel like you barely threw it, and I'm like, holy crap, that sailed.
Yeah. And that's so true. I was just thinking through throwing with my coach before I ended up on the trip up there, and I told him, I was like, well, I guess I just want to be throwing distance drivers for a little while because if I'm throwing, because he wants me throwing everything at 50% right now. And I was like, if I'm doing that, I think that I'm going to struggle for all that. And then sure enough, he proved me wrong immediately and was like, all right, cool. Hand me one of your distance drivers. And so I put a charger in his hand and he just whipped it. So I will tell you, if you're working on form, and I don't say this like to bash you or what you just said, Nathan, I give it as an encouragement, hopefully, is that 50% power, whatever, can be in the acceleration at the end of the shot kind of a deal. So do think like, even if you're throwing a 50% power and you're working on your form and you're trying to adjust your bag to work with your form, that 50% power doesn't have to be a soft 50.
Right.
Like it can be a deliberate 50 as well. So something to consider. As we move on, I want to jump into now we talk about often if there is a spot in people's bags that is the most cloudy, it is almost always fairway drivers because there are so many fairway drivers that exist. So looking at that setup, I think, Nathan, would you personally describe your fairway driver setup as cloudy, or is it pretty defined for you?
No, it's pretty cloudy.
And that's okay.
When you really think about it, when I go back and think about when I throw things and everything like that, and when I use it, it's cloudy. Like on paper, it's kind of, there, but it's spread out. But it's one of those, what do I actually use in certain situations?
Okay. So go ahead.
Sorry.
Brad.
Yeah, no, I was just going to jump in if you're ready to jump into it because I have a few comments on this
go for
7 speeds. So as someone who loves 7 speeds and is working on that spot in their bag currently, there is no reason for you to have a Grackle and a T-Bird in your bag.
And I made that realization last night when they fly the exact same.
Yeah. And, obviously pick the Grackle, in my opinion. But
that is a T-Bird. That's the Starlight. So that's like a 158, and that's really why they fly the same as well. And I found out that I didn't trust the T-Bird on as much anymore whenever I started manipulating it because I think it is the lightweight, it would start to feel like it was trying to turn over or straighten out a little bit more than I was, trusting it to.
Yeah, and I'd argue for us, Nathan, that Grackle, like looking on the chart, that Grackle is probably a bump over where the T-Bird is anyway for us, not where it currently sits on the chart. So right now it's sitting at a 1. It's probably over to the 2, especially in Sublime where it is for us right now. So there's really a little bit more gap between your Grackle and your Crave. So you're kind of mimicking, here's really the Grackle is your Mustang of your 7-speed. Your Crave, it's Fission Crave, right?
No, it's Proton. I think.
Interesting.
I think it's Proton. Is it the one we pulled when I was there?
Yeah, it's the one you pulled with the swirly rim and the orange clear.
It's Proton.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, by that Proton Crave is going to be your hex spot. So now we need to, look at your uplink. really, like you said, the relay and the crave are going to fight. So just make it easy on yourself, which one feels better for you.
Right.
And, the uplink, is the it more like the uplink for you? Is the it pretty flippy, or is
this
it
one
still?
is, I thought so at first. I had a DX it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's whenever I was like, all right, well, I really don't need this. I'm going to have it in here just for whatever reason to take up space. Yeah. So my discs don't flop over, But then, when you release the Robbie C it and the Star, way different animal. It's actually manageable. Like, I threw it the night before last or whatever, spent some time on it, and I was like, okay, this is actually usable for me. Because before it was like, if I gave it any sort of beans, it was done. It was done for. And I had the issue with the uplink at first till I started realizing, how to give it the Hyzer to actually get a actual understable flight out of it instead of just a turnover and completely go right. Because if you throw it flat, it's going right, like it's done. But if you can manipulate like a lot of Hyzer, it'll flip up, ride flat, and fade off to the left. But a little bit of Hyzer, it will flip up and then go off to the right, but then come back straight. I found that to be true with the Star it as well.
Okay, so it is turning for you though. That it is turning and right, but it's kind of mimicking the.
Figure out the angle, to how to manipulate the angle on it. It's
okay. And before we go to 9 speeds, Robbie, I have a question for you specifically, because here's kind of the theory that I'm doing. I started out kind of going like 5, 7, 9, 11, like just kind of covering those bases. Yeah. But now I'm starting to blend, like, fairways are a group, mids are a group, and then the few distance drivers I have are a group, right? So I may rely, like, a jackalope's a 9-speed, so I'm relying on that for my understable flight. But my, like, neutral, I'm relying on a 7-speed disc, and my overstable, I'm doing a 7. So I kind of treat the fairway category as a group together. Do you think that's the right approach, or do you really recommend people kind of stack the speeds, kind of like Nathan is doing here?
I think it depends on 2 factors. One, what kind of flights are you getting out of those? So, for instance, if we're looking at Nathan's bag and Nathan is getting like a controlled shot out of the it, so that's where he's like, okay, cool. Like, I can throw it at my 50% power and still see some of that understable flight and seeing that option. But when he steps up to the heat, if you try to throw the heat on that same exact shot, it like maybe stands up a little bit, rides straight, and then drops back down. Then at that point, I would say, yeah, you need to stack speeds. Like, that's how you need to treat it. But if you're throwing that 7-speed, you're throwing that it, and it's getting this flight, and then you throw the heat, and it's getting the same flight, then obviously that leads to some overlap. And so then I would say, yeah, find which one feels a little more comfortable for you. Like, for me, when I step up to super understable 9 speeds, for some reason, like, I struggle with that slot mightily. But I can take my Sting, which is a flippy ESP Sting, and I can get those same flights out of it. So I'm with you, Brad, where like now that I'm seeing a difference between a 7 and a 9 speed all the way up to an 11 speed kind of a deal, that is where, yes, I'm going to start grouping them together. And so I start saying, okay, so like personally, I have my 7 speeds are my understables, 7 speeds are my mid, like my straight a little over, and then I jump up to 9 because I have Firebirds in my super overstable spot.
Okay.
And for a while, I tried to rock like a 9 or 10 speed as a like pure distance driver, like an Onyx or a Thunderbird or something like that. Because I think that when you hear someone like Paul Macbeth say that his Onyx is as far as flying with disc in his bag, we should pay attention to things like that. So I tried that for a little bit, and I just found it to be too cloudy. I also think I didn't find the right 9 speed. So definitely curious to come back to that overall. But does that answer the question theoretically?
I think so. I think really what it is just maybe as you get more comfortable, Nathan, I think the way you're doing it's very good, because now you have the stacks at these like intervals in your bag, and you'll be able to see when, all right, my 9 speeds are actually flying like 9 speeds should now. Then you can probably start blending them together. But until then, you're like, okay, these are how my 7s fly. These are how my 9s fly. And there's not really any overlap because they're all flying so differently, because maybe like your Mad Cat, maybe you're not even really getting the real Mad Cat flight out of it yet. You're getting Nathan's Mad Cat flight, which is still important, but you're not getting like what a Mad Cat should fly like for your experienced player. So I think the way you're stacking it's very good, because I kind of did that too. But again, as my FD is my farthest flying disc in my bag. It's a 7-speed. So that's kind of where I'm at too, Robbie, where like, okay, well, if I need a straight distance shot with a little bit of fade, I'm going to my FD. But if I need this controlled turnover shot, I'm going to my 9-speed Apex Jackalope, for instance. So, so maybe the answer is just, it depends on like what skills you're developing. And as maybe you become either more experienced with like just disc golf and discs in general, or more experienced with like your form or your game, maybe those start to blend together a little bit. And maybe like the different, just out of curiosity. So your heat and your it right now, sorry to jump into 9 speeds, Robbie, but I think we're headed there anyway. But I mean, number one, what's the flight difference in those two discs for you? And then number two, what's the distance difference in those two?
First off, the biggest is the distance. I'm still with the it, not looking at 300. The heat, I think I've thrown it with like a 1 or 2 step, just a step up. I broke 300, like 316. I think that's my farthest throw I think I've had from off of just like a step up. Was with the heat, but that's one of those, I think, the stars aligned and I had, everything great because I got an actual heat flight out of that one. Mm-hmm. But that is it's not max weight. I think that one's in the lower 170s for that heat. Mm-hmm. But that's wrong with that is it's there because almost like I grow into, like I can use it, but mm-hmm. then, I don't want to jump up, but like, I guess the Hades does for me what I think the heat should do, but that Hades is like a 150 something, like a 157. And so it was just one of those, I saw, hey, this is a super lightweight came up and I'm like, it's only $14. All right, let's give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And so now the Hades is my uphill. Like if I'm going uphill, that's what it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you don't see any overlap really between your it and your heat. They still serve two separate purposes.
They're 2 different. And I would say that if anything with a disc in my bag that I'm like not comfortable with anymore, it is the heat, because it's like I'm not sure if I'm getting an overstable flight out of it, or it's not as understable. It's a Z plastic, so it's not as understable for me as I would think in my head.
Okay. So that's where if you need that flight, that's where you said you're going to your Hades now to try to get that flight because of the jump. Okay, that makes sense. So then I would say, looking at your lifts and your Valkyries, you have a really lightweight Valkyrie. Is that like your primary workhorse, or
the Star Valkyrie is that's the one I've had the longest, and that's the one the first time I broke 300 playing actual playing was with that disc. And so I was like, well, I bought the Champion one that's lightweight, which that one's not a straight flight. Like I get a full flight out of the one Valkyrie, right? So it'll turn to the right and it comes back. But the other one is just a push Hyzer the whole way. Like it'll be like a sort of turn, but there's no straighten out. It's a legitimate like curve the whole way through. So it's a bit more of a step with its Champ. But it's one of those, if I wanted like a long, slow turn, that's what it does.
And where does the lift fit into that?
I'm looking at that for my, forehand on that one.
Okay.
Be able to instead of be a touch forehand, but actual like a power forehand on that one.
Okay. And so if you're throwing the lift on that forehand line, it's not burning over for you or anything?
Not
kind of hitting it with some Hyzer.
Yeah. And because it is the glow plastic, so it's super. I mean, it's Firebird-esque for me, if you will. At first, I haven't thrown it backhand in a few weeks, but
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and he has a Hyzer release, and we talked about the lift because I throw my farthest flying forehand disc as a lift as well in Neutron, but I have a pretty decent Hyzer on it as well. But I think we talked about the lift.
That's the one you should try this if you wanted to. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like the heat could definitely fall out of the bag for at least the time being.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about it over Discord. you mentioned you have the Firebird in the bag and you got the Mad Cat in the bag, but they both do very similar things.
I feel like that's one of those because the Firebird's new because it's the foundation stamp Firebird that just came out last week.
Yeah.
So I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but I've thrown it enough to know that if I'm going left, that's what I'm throwing. Like short. And the Mad Cat now, I did throw that. That was like my forehand before because it's the Bravo plastic. I just love Lone Star's Bravo plastic. Like it's.
Oh.
And the Mad Cat now, I threw it the other day, and I got it straightened out. Didn't fly. It wasn't as far, but straightened out. And I was like, okay. And then come on back again. So, but came on back, at a decent, clip. It was a pretty decent to the left, fade to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fascinating. So that's, I would wonder. So it sounds to me like, is there any competition between the like? How necessary is the Mad Cat in terms of the Firebird's going to get left, but you also have that overstable Valkyrie that isn't necessarily understable? Like, is there confusion between those, or are they all three still pretty defined for you?
Well, there's a little bit of confusion there. Like the Mad Cat, I don't feel like after putting the Firebird in there, that's probably what I'll reach for a super overstable fight. But the other Valkyrie is the one where I wanted to start throwing it on the overstable line until it came back to. It's one of those I was trying to cycle. I wanted to start getting more into the multiple of molds type deal, and that was with the Valkyrie. I was like, okay. So it was one of those two. I wanted to get a lighter Valkyrie just to see what it did for me.
Totally.
And with the Champ, it totally didn't. I was not what I was expecting. So, but the Mad Cat is the one I feel like now, after having Firebird, I don't really have a place for it anymore.
Totally. And I think that the beauty of the Valkyrie being at 160 and the Champ is that if you're like, oh man, it's getting too flippy, it's very easy to be like, sick, I will just up the weight and the stability will come with it.
Right.
And you can also, they make Halo Valkyries. Those do exist. Like the Valkyrie is such a flagship mold. I wish more people threw it just because you can cover so many. I mean, that's where Jason, our first ever guest, for a while, his fairways were just Valkyries across the board.
Right.
DX all the way up to Champion, I think is the most stable he got.
And I was like, oh, they're cheap. Why not just get a DX and put it in there and see what it does and where it can take me,
Yeah, I would be curious how a DX Valkyrie, if it fights, like, if it does what you want the heat to do or something like that, or if a Halo Valkyrie does what you want the lift to do, things like that. Very, very, lots of options there. And
everything's centered on the Valkyrie because the Valkyrie is, I think, it's like my oldest disc I had. It was one of those, just when I kind of, back in the day, whenever flight numbers mattered, back when they said flight numbers mattered, I was like, oh, great. So we've got, a -2 and then 2. This should be great for me.
Yeah. This is great.
Didn't understand the 9-speed part. And so it's a little bit, I'm going to say it's beat in, but it is worn into doing what a Valkyrie should do.
I love that. There is, let's see. I'm going to grab it because it's right next to me. Still one of my favorite discs that has ever made my bag. I got this in my bag for you visual watchers. It is a Star Valkyrie with Maximus Decimus Meridius's helmet dyed onto it, a little blood splatter and some flames. Star Valkyrie, it is 166 grams.
Yeah, that's what my Star is.
And this is what, this disc was my workhorse when I had my all-in of a bag. And so the Valkyrie will always hold a special place in my heart. And there's some days where I'm like, maybe I should go back to this with my stings. But we'll see. So jumping from there to distance drivers, because this is where we really tested it. And I think, Brad, it's going to be interesting hearing this in comparison to the 158 Hades. And you're just going to have to talk me through, because I have never been a Hades thrower. I know, Brad, you were a Hades thrower for a little bit. So you are the perfect man to be having this conversation. But before we dive into the Hades, because we did test out some competition for your Hades, Nathan. But looking at, you got two beautiful looking discs on the other side. Any sort of fight or clash between the Zeus and your Wraith?
Oh yeah, the Wraith I can get. Well, it's a 161, so I get a full flight out of it. It's got the turn and comes back all the way across the back. It's actually the first disc I broke 300 with standing flat foot.
Wow.
So it's not been out that long, but it's one of those. It was like within the first 10 throws of that thing, I had hit 300 with it, standing flat. But so that's where it's like, okay, this is special. This is a special disc. And the Zeus, I got it in a subscription box, and so it's in there for my way overstable, distance for windy or whatever needs to be done.
Why would you throw the Zeus instead of like a Mad Cat or Firebird?
I feel like it's straighter.
Okay.
I would say the Zeus does fly straight before kicking off the left. I can flirt with 300 with the Zeus, but it's about 40 feet to the left, 50 feet to the left. But the Mad Cat and Firebird, I would feel like I'm still in the 250, 275 ranges. Maybe on max. The Firebird I haven't thrown as much, or I haven't got a chance to throw it as much. But really, the Zeus is just there in my head. It's like, okay, this is a really terrible weather, and it's windy, and I'm going to throw that. Because I know for me that it goes straight, and then it's going to go left.
Yeah. And I think that honestly, that makes a ton of sense for seeing all that and knowing the courses you have in your area. I feel like y'all are either completely protected from the wind or you are just completely exposed to the wind.
Well, I'll say the Zeus 2 to me is the best feeling disc I have as far as in my hand. So I really just like holding it sometimes. But I feel like in our area too, we don't have a lot of courses that ask of a lot of distance. Like you have broken up distance depending on the layout you're playing. But as far as like actual start to finish distance, you don't need to have that distance to begin with. You've got to get around something, but you can throw to that something and then make another shot. And so I haven't had a lot of opportunity as far as actual golf to put these things to the test as far as distance wise and the golf lines.
Yeah. And I bless your soul the first time that you played New London Longs. Because
that's the one that I have not played there.
Yeah. I would avoid it for a little while unless you want to quit disc golf. So
yeah, it's painful.
It will beat you into submission for sure. So Brad, we had you try two different discs today and compare it, like looking at that understable slot. I want to read it was a quote that Nathan sent, which was let's see. Well, I asked you one thing you were feeling not confident in your bag, and you said for your distance, getting an understable flight from your understable stuff. And that could be from form power. So I wanted to lean into something that like is going to have an understable flight when you throw it. Like you know what to expect. And it sounds like you have that with your on a shorter distance. But what about that bigger shot? You've got the room to open up. Here we go. I really want to let something loose. Give it the beans, as you might say.
The beans. All right. So today I tried out the Virus and I tried out the Sail. So I've been wanting to try. I've thrown the Virus a few times just recreationally. My brother-in-law has one. So and then the Sail is a disc. I have a Sail. I've never thrown said Sail. I've always wanted to, especially Robbie, after playing a few rounds with you this last week and watching some of the things you did with the Sail that I would not have typically thought a Sail should or would do. It made me very intrigued, just so I was excited about this episode to try it out.
I will say I've never been more proud than that scramble on 17.
That's what I was just thinking about whenever you brought it up.
That was cool.
Yep.
So there's a beauty to, obviously the three of us were there. None of you were, except for Wes, if you're listening. So There's a beauty to an understable disc that some people think like, okay, it's just immediately rolling. But what I love about the understable disc is that because it naturally wants to resist the flight path you put it on, it requires so much less power to get full flights out of. So if you're tucked off, for this shot, for instance, I had probably 260 to the basket, pure uphill the whole way, kind of low ceiling. And I am literally spread out my leg as far as I can to get it into these bushes from a knee, and I throw a turnover forehand that rides the whole way up to the basket. And why? Because if I tried to do that with a super overstable disc, I'd have to flex it to do something. But the sail, you can hit because it's that understable kind of a deal. So, Brad, what did they do for you while you're in the field?
Okay, so I threw varying different angles, forehand and backhand. We can go into specifics if you want to later, Robbie. But as a general statement, the virus is not as understable as one might think. And this was the case when I threw my brother-in-law's, and I was like, well, maybe it's just that particular one. This one's 170. Both of these are 170, and I wanted to go not in the 160 class for both of these because, I mean, a sail you can find 150. We have 150, 158 at the warehouse. I wanted a little bit more bite because I think there's just like not long-term usability for like a 150 class sail, at least for me. Yeah. And then the virus is 170 as well. The virus would, if I did an Anheuser shot and I tried to make it turn, it would turn really easy. And I had to be a little sensitive to what angle I let it go on. And if I give this thing like the beans, if you will, flat, and I really concentrate on flat, it would turn for me. But if I gave it like any sort of Hyzer release, it went straight, but it really didn't want to turn for me, which I thought was very weird. The sail, however, I just felt like I could smooth this on a baby Hyzer. It would flip up and just turn forever. Like I could throw this thing from one end of the football field to the other with like 60% power. And it was like beautiful. I was like, I need this disc. This is the disc I do not have in my bag. Because I throw the jackalopes, but they don't have like this. Like I have to make them turn, but I have learned like what angle I need to make them turn. And I have a couple different plastics, but I don't have a disc that will effortlessly turn like this for me until I go down to my uplink. And the thing with the uplink is I don't throw it very far because I have to like baby it so I don't burn it over. Mm-hmm. So there's like this very large gap I'm missing on that side. So this is like the sail is like my uplink of a distance driver, but I don't have to kill it to get it to do what it's supposed to do. If I like purposely did this like big nose up Anheuser, it would still turn, but it would come out, which was kind of nice because there's like a little bit of dome to this disc. The virus is surprisingly flat. I mean, for our listeners here, the virus is very flat, and the sail definitely has a little dome to it. So I think that helps with that little bit of accidental stability if you give it nose up angle. And the thing that made me consider the sail, Robbie, when we played was at Camp Hideaway. For those of you all, check out the birdie talk coming out in a few weeks, but it was hole. I don't know the hole numbers there. Maybe 11. The beautiful one, the big long like tunnel shot that goes across the creek there. Mm. And I tried to throw something straight, flip it up, and I hit a tree like 80 feet down the alley. But Robbie took a sail and did a very gentle turnover forehand again down this hallway. And I'm like, man, that is really the shot for this hole. I just don't have anything that will do it. So, and I tried it several times in the field and it did that. I mean, what's interesting is like it comes down to power. The virus on forehand, I had to like really give it power, and I had to be very careful my angle or it would burn over or it wouldn't turn. In the sail, I could kind of like just smooth it even on a little bit of Anheuser and throw it like 40% power. And I got a bunch of distance and I just did that slow turn and then just kind of sat down. So you would think that it'd be very like discs, but they're very different at least in my test today.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned it. Did you threw it on the soft Annie? I think people are afraid to throw something that understable on Anheuser because they're like, it's just going to burn over. It's going to do all that. Did you notice for? It sounds like, especially on the Virus, because it wasn't as understable as like numbers seem to give it. Did you notice the 11 speed factor of the sail kicking in to where it was like, okay, I can actually put a little. I can't put. Maybe I'm not putting the whole can of beans in there, but maybe like half a serving into it. And you could still like the 11 speed took over on it. Did that ever come into play?
Yeah, definitely. When I did the whole, like, I threw the whole field several times, but it did. I did have to make sure I released on Hyzer, but I could put some juice on it and it wouldn't just like do this like flip over and roll. Like it would do it. Like it's maybe one of the first discs I've gotten to really stand up on a pretty aggressive Hyzer and actually just gently turn. Like I've never been able to do that with the disc. So it definitely did that. And then I think on the soft and Hyzer, conversely, the 11 speed kicked in there because it didn't let it just like slam down. It like kind of flipped and it sat down, and it, like that little stability at the end because I didn't give it a lot of speed, a lot of rotation.
Yeah, I think that like Tyler Brickley's going to tell you that the Pipeline is DGA's best disc because it's just a beautiful flying 7-speed that does everything you want it to. Mm-hmm. I just think whether you throw 400 feet, whether you throw 200 feet, man, the sail, just having something that understable in your bag is so helpful. But so now I want to flip it here, Brad, because there's a disc that Nathan has in his bag that's doing something. It sounds like similar to what we're describing. You can tell me if that what it seems like, Nathan, your Hades is doing.
I would say the Hades does not have. It's more unstable than that. Okay. For me, like if I put on an Anheuser, it's done. Like it's going right. And for me, it does not. If I'm throwing it uphill, it will do the whole sail right and come back left. With Falling Creek, the last hole we did our park the basket on the tilt ace hole. That's the one where it came back. But if I was flat and I throw it, it's just going to keep on going to the right, and then it'll just sit. So there's no really comeback or straight flight straightening out on that.
Yeah. So, Brad, what are your thoughts? Would this fight that slot? Would it replace it and give more options? What do you think?
I think it's going to give you more options. Here's the danger with the Hades as a former Hades thrower. Number one, you can find an exact collar, an exact weight Hades exactly like that, and it's not going to fly the same. Right. Number one. Number two, there are so many different variations of Hades out there that you've got a unicorn or a cryptid disc, as we like to call it. The minute you throw that thing in the water, you're not going to be able to replace that. And I think you'll grow out of it because of how lightweight it is. What's cool, this sail is 170. So we're not talking about a hard to find disc. We're not talking about, and there's different plastics of the sail too.
Right.
Obviously there's the Hades as well now, but there's multiple plastics of the sail, which is like a benefit to you. And I just think that you'll like the feel. And also it's it's 11 speed. I think you're going to like the feel of it. And I don't know. I think the sail is going to progress you. I think the Hades is going to get, from experience, Nathan, is going to get you stuck on the Hades and you're not going to be able to move past it. And you're going to be really ticked off when you lose it and you can't find one to replace it. I
don't have any emotional attachment to the Hades. It was literally like, let me see what a super fast disc and a low weight does for me and what it is. I'll even take it and just, like, I thought about it the other day. I was like, if I want to skip here, short shot, let me just flick forehand this to catch a skip on that one. I did it, but it's one of those. It does. I've thrown on the same kind of forehand flip up as an uplink before, just maybe as a, if I wanted to skip at the end instead of dying when it hit. Because I do enjoy the uplink for that. It's just a short little flick at the easy 100-foot. So
right. Yeah, and also I'll say just as a bonus, I've never been able really to throw a roller before, and I laid down multiple rollers with a sail that I would consider decent. And again, because if I'm throwing something, I don't know, like let's say a Heat or a Hades, again, I guess it's probably my own subconscious, but I'm like, man, I got to really turn this thing over. I got to really hit this thing to get it to, and some of it's form now because I'm not trying to throw it up in the air. I'm trying to get it to turn like at this like middle spot. But the sail, like I could just gently like do this little Hyzer where I'm focused on like my form. And I don't feel like I don't lose my form by trying to have to kill it to get it to roll.
Right.
And multiple times I did it, and it hit on an angle, it stood up, and then it turned right. And I was like, wow, okay, maybe I can throw a roller. Now, am I going to really need to throw a roller around here? Probably not, but I can.
Yeah. Like, talk about an easy, like, especially if the OB on the right is not playing in. If you guys have watched Foundation content, I think a roller on hole 2 at Falling Creek, not a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
True. Awesome. Well, it sounds like, Nathan, we got a sale coming your way.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting because sale is actually on my list of discs I'm interested in or have been interested in. So that's pretty exciting.
You should be. I think it'll knock the Heat and the Hades out.
Okay, well that sounds good to me.
And it'll be right in that nice middle ground, and it'll work out for you. And hey, I've never been able to say this, but Nathan, you can pick this up in store whenever you want to. I'll be working the store today when we're filming this if you want to swing by and grab it.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, we would love to have you back on in a future episode if you're willing to let us know if you have sailed away or if it's back in the dock.
Oh,
definitely.
Awesome. Well, dude, Nathan, thank you for coming on. And we look forward to having you on a future episode, man.
Awesome.
I'm telling y'all, it's hard because I'm extremely biased in these moments to, if I found a disc that really works for me and I love it, like it's very hard for me not to just want everyone to throw those discs and know that there's other options out there. Like I can see, oh man, he's rocking pigs. He's going to be rocking a sail, things like that. So obviously the sail isn't the only option that exists out there in the world. Right. There are loads of other things. The Mamba comes to mind. If you're looking at an Innova alternative. So,
you could probably throw the diamond in that spot too.
Yeah, I would say a diamond. You could find a lightweight, like a lighter weight sapphire. I realize sapphires generally come lightweight anyways, but loads of options for you. But just having that disc that you know is understable and then working with it and not putting it in a box of, because I think a lot of times, like on multiple shots, Brad, that you saw me throw the sail, if I would have told you, hey, I'm throwing a sail on this shot, I'm sure there would have been some like question marks of like,
really? Huh? Yeah.
Like that's a terrible idea.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I was impressed, just because again, I don't think of the sail on forehand. I don't. I'll throw the uplink on forehand and I don't think twice about that, but for whatever reason, the sail, I'm like, why in the world? But yeah, after seeing what it does, and to your point with like that 11 speed kind of kicks in when you give it a little less rotation, or even when you give it a little bit more beans, as Nathan would say, it's a very versatile disc, and Katrina Allen picked a good one to put her stamp on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think speaking of that, we were talking about options to try out. The Vortex, another phenomenal option. If you feel like, hey, I don't have the beans to get the 11 speed up, the Vortex would do the exact same thing on a slower level. I guarantee you that's why she had the Vortex made, is she was like, sometimes in the woods, I cannot put the oomph into it that I need out of the sail. So the Vortex, great trial option. But these are all just a few discs that you may be able to find over in an awesome place, foundationdisc.com. Brad, what's new in the warehouse this week?
Man, we're just having back-to-back weeks of like craziness in the warehouse. So let's see. We have a ton. The highlight here is we have a ton of Discmania restock, and Discmania was gracious enough to let us order a bunch of stuff from their mystery boxes that they've been putting out. So we have some wild stuff. Like we have FD3 like original stamp that's not even out yet. We have Jackal stamped FDs. We have swirly MD3s. I mean, we have extra Exosoft Tactics. I mean, you'll just have to check it out. There's a bunch of wild stuff that we have. And then CD1s, MD1s. I mean, you name it, we have it from Discmania right now. Oh, even a Crush Boys CD1. With Simon still on it, like we have those, and there's some beautiful discs in there. So make sure you check those out. Oh, clear mystery box stamp MD3s, crazy. Dang. So there's a lot of good stuff there. On top of that, we're still uploading. I almost said MP3s. That's funny. MVP. So like we got a bunch of proxies going up, Craves, Photons, Waves, some of that like neutral, slightly overstable to understable stuff going in there. Emerson Keith commemorative bayonets in the Charlie plastic are releasing Friday morning. So before you hear this, I'm sure there's some left there, but we got plenty so people can access those. That's a great feeling plastic too, by the way, is a Charlie plastic.
Yeah.
So that's coming out. I believe I got the shipping notification. We should have some more inner cores in their base plastic. They should be up Friday. As well as we have some new foundation dry fits. You ask for them. We have some different ones. They have the hybrid logo, so the foundation bar stamp and the foundation logo on them. Robbie, you were there when they came in, actually.
Yeah,
so
I love it. And I will say, like, from a fit standpoint, they're a little, I'm not going to say they're long, but they are longer than the first run of dry fits that we had as well. Yes. So if you're a taller guy like myself, a little lanky side, and I know me, I love when I don't have to worry about when I'm like, I have a shirt on. If I lift my hands up, like, oh, there's my belly. Yeah. This run of the dry fits definitely has that comfort and safety to it. So for you long and tall folks, fantastic run.
Yeah, so those will be out. We have a black, gray, and like royal blue. So there will be multiple colors there. You can check those out. And if you didn't check out last week, we have a bunch of performance hats back in stock of different colors. We have yellow and gray and black as well as blue still in stock. So all the good stuff for your sweaty summer needs, dry fits, performance hats. So you're out there on the course. You know, if you don't have a hat in there, you don't have a shirt in there, you got a good disc in there. And when we got a good disc, Robbie,
you keep it in the bag. We'll see you on the next one, y'all.